Hi, my name's Sandy Anderson, and this is my introduction for special education for building leaders. A little bit about myself. This is me with my family. We have 4 kids, a junior, freshman, 7th grader, and a 2nd grader. Just a little bit about who I really am. I'm a lifelong learner trying to do the best that I can to honor God through the way that I interact with my husband, children, and everyone I encounter on a daily basis. I strive to always be a part of the solution and not part of a problem. I want to be the best person I can be in all circumstances and work to achieve that. And I believe in direct communication at all times, and I'm always wanting to learn how to be a better person. So that is a little bit about who I am personally. And then professionally, I'm currently a reading specialist at a little school called Westmoreland Elementary. Professionally, I believe that I do whatever it takes in a healthy and productive way to help children learn how to read and discover their ability to learn. And I love to also help teachers discover the same for themselves. And that's kind of what has led me on this path to building leadership. Thinking about the different resource summaries, I'm going to give a brief overview of each of these because there's a lot of information that is somewhat repetitive, so I will do my best to summarize without reading directly the entire time. So the first article was called 7 Ways to Create an Inclusive Classroom Environment. And basically this just went through and provided multiple tips on how you could create that type of environment specifically inside your classroom. It talked about how to still meet the needs of all learners, how to provide teachers with adequate preparation to meet those needs and provide a more differentiated approach. Also included discussions about curriculum and how to include that in a more inclusive approach to all students, no matter what their nationality, gender, or any of those specifics might be. And then also creating a community space in which everyone is respected and open discussion is always welcome from both students and teachers. The next article was Inclusive Leadership in Education. I thoroughly enjoyed this article. In fact, I read it several times. I felt it did a great job of really helping me to understand what my role as a leader would be in a building for promoting inclusiveness in the classroom as well as in our school climate, our culture. It identifies just integral parts in which are my responsibility as a building leader and the different traits in which I need to possess and show in order to be effective in that inclusiveness. The next article was 10 Reasons for Inclusive Schools, and this just kind of provided the why as to why this matters and why it needs to be a part of what we do every day. Basic rights to education is probably the main one that it hits, as well as learning along similar aged peers, a focus on capabilities rather than disabilities, learning how to accept one another, develop stronger peer relationships, the confidence in interactions with non-identical peers. I thought that was an excellent point. Teacher instruction becoming more student-focused, the professional resources needed to accomplish these things, and then the physical resources that must also be included to create an inclusive school. The next article was what is inclusive education and how you can implement it. So this just kind of defines what inclusive education looks like. I put on there that knowing what inclusive education is, why it is important, and how it can be implemented provides educators with the tools to create an environment that promotes the success of all students. That type of environment, we use the term least restrictive often, but truly that means including all students in the general education classroom as much as possible and able to for that student. It is a term that can be used very loosely and also manipulated in many situations. And so this just kind of addressed some of that. The following article was what are the roles of principals in successful inclusive schools? This was another one that I enjoyed because it was very specific to how building leaders can create this type of systemic change. I felt it gave very hands-on approaches or plans that could be implemented. I really liked the aspects in there when they talked about incorporating the special education teacher into team planning. I thought that was something that I had never really considered. Specifically in our school, it's so small that the special education teacher covers grades K through 4. So I'm kind of processing through how I would address that type of an issue where there's only one special education teacher. But it provided some very good insight onto different ways to create more of an inclusive school and not just within a classroom or a grade band. The inclusive school article discussed just kind of challenging some different predispositions that we might have about what inclusion is and what that means. And I really appreciated this article because it kind of validated a lot of thoughts that I've had about diversity and inclusion not just being an academic realm, but the way in which we offer opportunities to all students. I see socioeconomic status being a huge barrier for inclusion, and many of those opportunities for students as a whole learner outside of the classroom. And I appreciated acknowledging those things and maybe providing other opportunities in which we could address these. It made me specifically think of our middle school that provides clubs as an elective. And I think it's just an opportunity to create that culture a lot more that would not exist without its implementation, since all students attended, it's during the day, and there isn't ever any outside resources that need to be applied where lack of student resources might be a barrier. Developing an inclusive classroom culture. This hit home with me because I was a classroom teacher for about 6 or 7 years, and I notoriously had a special education classroom because that's how it was done at the time. And I do feel like that was one of my strong suits as an educator, was creating a culture in which every single kid was respected. We all worked together and we were all valued. And it became the norm. There was no question about how we did business because we all respected each other and were there to support each other's learning. Building a school culture with equity and access to knowledge. This was a very good video. I appreciated how it was delivered, and I appreciated also addressing the fact that some inequities or challenges that students might be faced can be used as a stepping stone to help them exceed their expectation in meeting those needs and building upon that. I really appreciated how the video addressed those things. The value of inclusive education is kind of what we discussed before, how this equips our students to be ready to enter the real world in all of them, and it's not such a stepping stone when they're surrounded by people who are different than them. Then we had creating inclusive schools for all students, which was similar to another article before. So I'm not really going to go through a lot of that. It's summarized right there for you. Tips on creating an inclusive school and why it matters. I actually screenshotted several parts of this article for some of our PLCs that we're currently going through in our building. I really valued addressing a school-wide focus on behavior management versus individual, because I feel like that is an easy place in which some teachers might not promote inclusiveness, whether they're aware of their own biases or how that impacts students. I definitely see differences in how expectations for certain students versus others. For example, in the hallway, a student who might be on an individual behavior plan might be held to a higher expectation than a gen ed student, and I continuously see that being pointed out, and I don't think anybody's aware that it's such an issue within our building because everybody is doing what they believe is best for kids. And so I really appreciated that aspect being discussed in this article. So thinking about definitions, how I would define an inclusive school culture. I think that inclusive school culture can be defined as a place where the expectation is for all students to exceed their potential through equitable learning opportunities in an accepting, respectful, and accommodating learning environment. I believe that education is defined as the equitable access to resources and learning opportunities, no matter a student's identified abilities. And then I think leadership can be defined as the opportunity to set a precedence and an expectation for performance while providing the support systems to meet those expectations. Considering the first question of if an inclusive culture starts from the premise that everyone in school, students, educators, administrators, support staff, and parents should feel that they belong, realize their potential, and contribute to the life at school, what is the school's leader's role in maintaining this culture? And what do you do if it doesn't exist? I believe that the school leader is responsible for not only setting this expectation for all staff, students, and stakeholders, but they're also responsible for providing the resources to achieve that. We can all often say we need to do these things, but if we don't provide the support system and the resources in order to make that happen, that's on us, and that's our position as a school leader. I believe that accountability is another big aspect of this that must occur that I often see not occurring. Those are the hard conversations. And then I think if this type of culture doesn't exist, we have to take the time to address it and not be scared to. And through that, sharing our visions of what inclusive culture looks like, why it's important, and what we must do to change from there, and how teachers and students and staff will all be held accountable if that doesn't happen. Moving on to the next question regarding an advocate and what support can a school leader provide to encourage advocacy. I think through creating an inclusive culture is what will provide students with the confidence to advocate for themselves and to teachers. Through creating an environment where everybody is loved, welcomed, respected, and everybody's needs are met, students will naturally feel comfortable in reaching out. What plans and strategies could be implemented to ensure equitable treatment of students and or staff in an inclusive culture? So these are just kind of some of the highlights that I pulled out. There's definitely more that could be addressed, but these are the ones that I thought were the most important. I think teacher education is huge. I work with many teachers who have been teaching for 35 years that have never gone through inclusive culture training. They don't believe that it should happen because they've never been taught about it. I think shared responsibility, that students who might be identified with disabilities aren't just the responsibility of a special education teacher, but the responsibility of everyone. Providing the supports to have collaboration time, so that could be a shared responsibility. I think school-wide focus on behavior is also big, as well as raised expectations for all students. I am not a fan of the phrase, well, some kids just aren't going to learn that. In fact, that is probably my biggest pet peeve that I hear as a reading specialist. I think that inclusiveness also comes with high expectations for everyone. I think curriculum that addresses the needs of all students, we've seen a big change in this in the reading world with the science of reading and teaching all kids the way they need to be taught how to read. And then a community-based approach. This would include parents, teachers, staff, and all students as part of solving this problem. What steps can a school leader take to change negative assumptions that affect teaching and learning in an inclusive culture? I think professional development and learning is key. Just to go a little bit further with that, I think PLCs would be a stronger avenue rather than just one in-service that talks about inclusion, because through PLCs we can provide a lot of accountability as well as collaboration to help build that support system and to challenge some of those negative assumptions. My concluding statements are here. I think this definitely correlated with the standard because it increased my knowledge on the importance and necessity of creating an inclusive school culture. I also believe this was incredibly relevant to my learning as a future building administrator through helping me to recognize challenges I might encounter in cultures that must be shifted to support the success and well-being of all students and adults. This assignment provided me with the systematic approaches that I can apply to shift or maintain a culture of inclusiveness in my future building. I also believe that through reflecting, I really enjoyed this assignment. It gave me a lot of words to better communicate the way I've often felt about inclusion, and also provided me with great tools as to how I could support my future staff and students in doing so. So thanks for listening. Have a great day.